Karen's face flushed a deep crimson as she slammed her fist against the community center's glass doors. "This is an outrage. I demand access to the handicap spot immediately," she screeched, drawing startled looks from passersby. The security guard, a young man named Jason, stepped forward hesitantly. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but that spot is reserved for residents with a valid handicap permit. You'll need to park elsewhere." Spittle flew from Karen's lips as she unleashed a tirade of obscenities. "How dare you? I run this neighborhood. My taxes pay your salary. Now open this door or I'll have you fired." Jason stood his ground, his expression grim. "I'm afraid I can't do that, ma'am. It's against policy. You'll need to find another parking spot." Karen's beady eyes narrowed to slits, and her fleshy fingers curled into claws. "You listen to me, you pathetic little worm," she hissed. "I am Karen Fitzpatrick, the president of the HOA. If you don't open this door right now, I'll make sure you never work in this community again." Jason steeled himself, refusing to back down. "I'm sorry, but the rules apply to everyone. I won't be able to let you park there." With a guttural scream, Karen lunged forward, her meaty hands reaching for Jason's throat. The security guard recoiled, barely avoiding her grasp. Pandemonium erupted as onlookers scrambled to safety, their cries echoing through the courtyard. Karen's face contorted with rage, her eyes wild and unfocused. "You'll regret this, you useless piece of trash," she bellowed, spittle flecking the guard's face. "I'll make sure your life is ruined." Jason took a step back, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Ma'am, please calm down. If you continue to behave this way, I'll have no choice but to call the police." The threat of law enforcement seemed to give Karen pause, and she hesitated, her chest heaving with labored breaths. The standoff hung in the air, a tense silence blanketing the scene, as everyone waited with bated breath to see what would happen next. Karen's beady eyes darted around the courtyard, taking in the sea of faces staring back at her. Her grip on the situation was slipping, and she knew it. With a frustrated growl, she backed away from the security guard, her hands trembling with barely contained rage. "This isn't over, you pathetic little man," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "I'll make sure you regret the day you crossed me." Jason remained silent, his posture relaxed, but his gaze unwavering. He had dealt with Karen's tantrums before, and he knew that the best approach was to remain calm and steadfast. As Karen stalked away, muttering curses under her breath, the onlookers slowly began to disperse, their initial shock giving way to a mixture of relief and disbelief. But Karen wasn't done. She stormed across the courtyard, her heavy footsteps echoing against the concrete. Reaching her car, she fumbled with the keys, her fingers clumsy with anger. With a frustrated huff, she flung the door open and climbed behind the wheel, her face contorted in a mask of pure rage. Gunning the engine, she peeled out of the parking lot, tires screeching against the asphalt. As she sped through the neighborhood, her mind raced, formulating a plan to get back at the security guard and assert her dominance over the community. Karen had always prided herself on her ability to manipulate the system and get her way. She was the president of the HOA, after all, and that meant she wielded a considerable amount of power. She knew exactly how to play the game, and she wasn't about to let some lowly security guard stand in her way. Pulling into her driveway, she slammed the car door and stormed into her house, her mind whirring with schemes and strategies. She had to find a way to get back at Jason, to make him pay for his insolence and disrespect. As she paced around her living room, Karen's lips curled into a malicious grin. She had an idea, and it was going to be glorious. Karen's plan began to take shape in her mind as she paced back and forth in her living room. She had always been adept at navigating the bureaucratic maze of the HOA, and she knew exactly how to leverage her position to her advantage. Striding over to her desk, she pulled out a stack of documents and began meticulously sorting through them. Her eyes gleamed with a twisted sense of triumph as she discovered a loophole in the community's bylaws that could work in her favor. With a few strategic phone calls and a well-timed email, Karen set her plan in motion. She summoned the HOA board for an emergency meeting, casting herself as the aggrieved party and painting Jason as the villain who had wronged her. As the board members gathered, Karen launched into a dramatic recounting of the day's events, embellishing and exaggerating details to make her case seem more compelling. She played on the board's sense of loyalty and their desire to maintain order within the community, appealing to their shared interest in preserving the neighborhood's pristine image. "Gentlemen, this is a matter of the utmost importance," Karen declared, her voice dripping with feigned concern. "We simply cannot have our security guards openly defying the wishes of the HOA president. It sets a dangerous precedent and undermines the very foundation upon which our community is built." The board members exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the underlying tension in Karen's words. They knew that she was a formidable force to be reckoned with, and few dared to cross her. "What do you propose we do about this, Karen?" one of the board members asked tentatively. A triumphant smile spread across Karen's face as she presented her plan. "I believe the appropriate course of action is to suspend Jason pending a full investigation. We must send a clear message that insubordination will not be tolerated, and that the authority of the HOA president must be respected at all times." The board members nodded in agreement, their expressions resolute. They had fallen right into Karen's trap, and she knew it. With a self-satisfied smirk, she leaned back in her chair, already envisioning the sweet taste of her victory. Jason's heart sank as he received the call, summoning him to an emergency HOA board meeting. He knew that Karen had wasted no time in retaliating against him, and he braced himself for the confrontation to come. As he entered the community center, the board members greeted him with solemn expressions, their eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and unease. Karen, on the other hand, wore a triumphant grin that made Jason's stomach churn. "Jason, thank you for joining us," the board president said, his voice grave. "We've been made aware of the incident that occurred earlier today, and we've decided that immediate action must be taken." Jason straightened his posture, his jaw set with determination. "I understand, sir, but I can assure you that I was simply following protocol and acting in the best interests of our community." Karen's eyes narrowed, and she leaned forward in her chair. "That's not how I see it, Jason. Your actions were a blatant act of defiance against the authority of the HOA president. That is simply unacceptable." Jason opened his mouth to protest, but the board president raised a hand, silencing him. "Karen has presented a compelling case, Jason. We have no choice but to suspend you pending a full investigation into this matter." Jason's heart sank, and he felt a surge of panic rising in his chest. "But sir, that's not fair. I was just doing my job." Karen's lips curled into a malicious smile. "Sorry, Jason, but the board has spoken. You're suspended, effective immediately, and let this be a lesson to you. Nobody crosses Karen Fitzpatrick and gets away with it." Jason's mind raced as he tried to formulate a response, but the board members were already gathering their belongings and heading for the exits. He watched helplessly as Karen strode out of the room, her shoulders squared with a sense of triumph. As the door closed behind them, Jason felt a wave of despair wash over him. He had never imagined that his simple act of enforcing the rules would lead to such a devastating consequence. But as he stared at the empty room, he knew that he had to find a way to fight back and clear his name. Jason's head was spinning as he mulled over his predicament. How could the HOA board have so easily accepted Karen's version of events and decided to suspend him? He knew that he had done nothing wrong, and yet here he was, facing the very real prospect of losing his job. As he paced around his apartment, a surge of anger began to replace the initial feelings of despair. He had always taken pride in his work, and the thought of having his reputation tarnished by Karen's machinations was infuriating. Determined to clear his name, Jason began to research the HOA's bylaws and policies, searching for any loopholes or inconsistencies that he could leverage to his advantage. He knew that Karen had maneuvered the system to her benefit, and he was determined to do the same. Hours turned into days as Jason pored over the documents, meticulously cross-checking every detail. Finally, he stumbled upon a clause that he believed could work in his favor. According to the bylaws, any disciplinary action taken against an employee of the HOA had to be reviewed by an independent panel, with the option for the employee to present their case. With a renewed sense of purpose, Jason reached out to the HOA board, requesting a formal hearing. He knew that this would be his only chance to set the record straight and prove that he had done nothing wrong. The day of the hearing arrived, and Jason steeled himself for the confrontation. As he entered the community center, he was greeted by a crowd of residents, some of whom had witnessed the incident with Karen. To his surprise, many of them offered words of encouragement and support, seemingly sympathetic to his plight. When the hearing began, Jason presented his case with a calm and composed demeanor, carefully outlining the events of that fateful day. He highlighted the fact that he had simply followed protocol, and that Karen's outburst had been entirely unwarranted. As the panel listened attentively, Jason could sense the tide turning in his favor. He knew that he had a fighting chance, and the thought of finally exacting justice against Karen's scheming filled him with a renewed sense of determination. The tension in the room was palpable as the independent panel deliberated over Jason's case. Karen sat in the corner, her brow furrowed in concentration, clearly anxious about the outcome. After what felt like an eternity, the panel president cleared his throat and addressed the room. "We have carefully reviewed the evidence and testimonies presented today, and we have come to a decision." Jason held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. Based on the information provided, we find that the suspension of Jason was unwarranted and not in accordance with the HOA's policies and procedures. We hereby order the immediate reinstatement of Jason to his position, with full back pay and benefits. A collective gasp rippled through the room, and Karen's face contorted with fury. She leaped to her feet, her fists clenched at her sides. "This is an outrage," she screeched, her voice shrill and grating. "You have no right to overturn my decision. I am the president of this HOA, and I demand respect." Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication as he watched Karen's meltdown. He had known all along that he was in the right, and now he had the backing of an independent panel to prove it. "Calm down, Mrs. Fitzpatrick," the panel president said sternly. "The decision has been made, and it is final. If you continue to disrupt these proceedings, we will have no choice but to have you removed from the premises." Karen's face flushed a deep shade of crimson, and for a moment, Jason thought she might actually lunge at the panel president. But then, as if realizing the futility of her outburst, she sank back into her chair, her shoulders slumped in defeat. As the hearing concluded, Jason stepped forward to address the panel. "Thank you, gentlemen, for your fairness and impartiality. I'm grateful for the opportunity to clear my name and to continue serving this community to the best of my abilities." The panel members nodded in acknowledgement, and Jason felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that his battle with Karen was far from over, but for now, he had emerged victorious. As Jason left the community center, he was greeted by a small crowd of residents who had gathered to show their support. Many of them expressed their outrage at Karen's behavior and their admiration for Jason's dedication to upholding the rules. "We're so glad they saw through her nonsense," one woman exclaimed, her eyes shining with relief. "You were just doing your job, and she had no right to try and get you fired." Jason smiled gratefully, feeling a surge of pride and validation. "Thank you all for your support. It means a lot to know that there are residents in this community who value honesty and fairness." Another resident, a middle-aged man with a graying beard, stepped forward and placed a hand on Jason's shoulder. "Listen, we know that Karen is going to be a thorn in your side from now on. She's not going to take this lying down, and she's going to do everything in her power to try and get back at you." Jason nodded, his expression hardening. "I'm well aware of that, sir. But I'm not going to back down. I'm going to keep doing my job to the best of my ability, and I won't let Karen's antics intimidate me." The man nodded approvingly. "Good. We've got your back, Jason. If she tries anything, you let us know, and we'll be there to support you." As the crowd dispersed, Jason felt a renewed sense of determination. He knew that the battle with Karen was far from over, but he was no longer alone. The residents of the community had rallied behind him, and he was determined to use that support to his advantage. Heading back to his apartment, Jason began to formulate a plan. He would need to be vigilant and stay one step ahead of Karen's schemes, but he was confident that he could outmaneuver her. After all, he had the backing of the community, and that was something that Karen could never hope to match. As he settled into his chair, Jason's lips curled into a determined smile. He was ready to take on Karen and whatever challenges she might throw his way. Over the next few weeks, Jason remained on high alert, fully expecting Karen to launch a counteroffensive in the wake of her defeat. True to form, the Overweight HOA president wasted no time in plotting her revenge. She began by making a series of complaints to the HOA board, alleging that Jason was neglecting his duties and failing to properly maintain the community's common areas. Jason knew these accusations were baseless, but he also understood that Karen's influence over the board could still pose a serious threat. Undeterred, Jason redoubled his efforts, meticulously documenting his work and ensuring that every aspect of the community center's operations was running smoothly. He also made a point of fostering stronger relationships with the residents, listening to their concerns and addressing them promptly. As Karen's attempts to undermine Jason's credibility continued to fail, she grew increasingly unhinged. She started making veiled threats, warning Jason that he was playing a dangerous game, and that he would regret the day he crossed her. Jason refused to be intimidated, however. He knew that as long as he had the support of the community, Karen's schemes would be powerless. So, he continued to stand firm, confident in the knowledge that he was on the right side of the conflict. Finally, Karen's desperation reached a boiling point. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, she orchestrated a smear campaign, flooding the community's social media channels with false accusations and outright lies about Jason's conduct. But the residents, having witnessed Jason's professionalism and dedication firsthand, refused to be swayed. They rallied behind him, flooding the pages with messages of support and denouncing Karen's underhanded tactics. Realizing that her plan had backfired spectacularly, Karen retreated, her face flushed with humiliation. She knew that she had lost the battle, and that her reign as the all-powerful HOA president had come to an end. As the dust settled, Jason stood tall, basking in the triumph of his hard-won victory. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but he was determined to use this experience as a stepping stone to greater success. After all, he had proven that even the mightiest of HOA Karens could be defeated by the power of honesty, integrity, and a supportive community.